When a young dreamer with a top hat sets off to seize his future, he has to overcome close-minded professionals that try to stop him, and a fire that destroys what he thought would be his big break. But by singing a fun song and creating something even better, he finally accomplishes his dream that connects back to who we thought he was when we went into the theater. That's right, I'm talking about Wonka. Spoilers ahead. The book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was published in 1964 to high praise, and directly led to a movie adaptation in 1971 starring Gene Wilder as the eccentric candy maker. In 2006, nothing happened and there was not another adaptation, but a few years ago, Warner Brothers announced a prequel both to the book and to the Gene Wilder movie that would explain how Willy became Wonka. That is not addressed in this movie. He is already Willy Wonka in the beginning of the movie, but what is addressed is how Willy Wonka started selling candy and opened his first factory, ending a few years before the flashback stories in the original movie, and probably leaving enough time for a sequel to the prequel that takes place before the original, if they ever wanted to do that. Okay, but how was the movie overall? It's alright. I liked it. Again, spoilers incoming. Wonka follows a young Willy Wonka, who arrives in Europe with the dream to become a chocolate maker. When he gets tricked into renting a room that comes with a large amount of debt, he's forced to work it off in the underground laundry shop. Refusing to give up on his dreams, Wonka concocts a plan to team up with the other workers to secretly get all the ingredients he needs to make his candy. After selling a bunch of it while outwitting a group of major chocolate makers and a corrupt police chief that's trying to stop him, every character gets a happily ever after, and Wonka opens up his very own chocolate factory. Ultimately, this is a pretty standard sequel. Not that that's a bad thing. It seems, though, like this entire movie was written backwards, with a laundry list, no pun intended, of things they needed to do to set up the original. He needs to work with laundry. Candy needs to make people change color. He needs to be on a boat. He needs to see the power of contract fine print. You get the idea. The biggest complaint I have about this movie, then, is that it's not really the same version of Willy Wonka. It feels like a completely different tone and approach to humanity. And granted, this is a younger Wonka, but is he going to turn into our version of Willy Wonka in just a few years? When Gene Wilder was working on the original 1971 film, he suggested that his introduction scene show him walking out with a cane, only to roll into a flawless somersault. The reason being that, from then on, no one would ever know if he was lying or being truthful. Timothée Chalamet's Willy Wonka is not at all like that. Director Paul King describes his Wonka as someone who learns that the world is hard, but who doesn't fall down to it. He grows through the challenges. That's different than the guy who tricks and maybe actively plans to kill some kids just so he knows who to pass his company on to. I mentioned the possibility of another film that could connect this to the Wilder film, but that film would have to be very dark. It would have to show us Wonka's turn from a wide-eyed and resilient dreamer to a crazy psychopath nearly ruined by his competition. But that's because this film doesn't have the darkness that the original does. That said, I don't really care. There's enough time between the two films that I think it works out, and I appreciate the heart that this film has. It believes that everything will be okay, and it will be. You know from the beginning that everything is going to work out. But that's part of the charm of it, I think. If you recognized the name Paul King, it's likely because he was behind the Paddington movies. And that tone of innocence and whimsy works really well with the take they've decided to go with here. Honestly, I think this movie is really close to being great. It's just trapped in the weird enigma that is modern cinema. It's a fun, positive film that had to be marketed as the next Christmas blockbuster. It had to live up to the original movie without copying it. It had to get people to go to the theaters without spoiling the entire thing. On this count, it failed. Yes, people saw it, but the first trailer is okay. And then the second trailer, they completely spoiled his mom showing up, which was probably the biggest emotional moment of the entire film. They showed him in the factory at the end. Don't do that! The ending is like the big moment that doesn't work if you show it to us before we even get into the movie theater. Not to mention, this film is a musical. Like an actual musical. it has 11 musical numbers. None of that, except for a tiny little excerpt of the Oompa Loompa song, made it into the trailers. They scored the trailer with an epic trailer version of Pure Imagination, and they have a few shots of people dancing, but there's no actual singing. For the musical, I plan to talk about the weird relationship that movies have with musicals some other time, but it feels worse with this film because both Wonka movies have some music in them. Of course this one will too. Don't try to hide it, while still also including people dancing. Maybe he didn't want to advertise that it was a musical because it wasn't sure if it wanted to be. It falls victim to the classic battle between diegetic music that's playing in the scene and non-diegetic music that only exists inside the character's head. They're singing when they shouldn't be, but they also constantly acknowledge the music. It doesn't really bother me because it's just trying to be a fun movie, but stuff like that usually signals a movie's insecurities with its musicality. And when it's being a musical, it's actually good. The choreography is fun, the musical numbers are catchy, A World of Your Own is still stuck in my head after a week and a half. I like it. I've heard a lot of discourse about Timothée Chalamet not being a good choice for Willy Wonka, specifically regarding his singing voice. A lot of people are saying that his voice wasn't strong enough for the songs in this movie. Personally, though, I think he did well. Is he Les Mis ready? No. But the songs in this movie aren't operatic, and I think he did a great job with what the film wanted him to do. He had charisma to him while still being very awkward, and was so sure of himself that he ended up not being sure of anything, if that makes sense. This was clearly supposed to be Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka, and the plot of this movie tries to connect to that one. That really comes across to me. There are so many little references to specifically the original movie that make it clear that the team behind this liked it. The Oompa Loompa repeatedly says Gene Wilder's
"Good day, sir! I said good day!"
Wonka does the same weird step thing that Wilder did, and the Oompa Loompa holds the same cup that Wilder took a bite out of in his Pure Imagination. Did they live up to the original? No, I don't think so. But I enjoyed it a lot, as entirely its own thing, regardless. I'm not going to study this film, but I'm probably going to rewatch it. As long as no one starts singing in Dune Chapter 2, I'll be happy.